Hey, what's up YouTube? Lightsaber Samurai here. I'm back again with another video, and with the crazy fluctuating prices of the retro video game market in the last year or so, a lot of you are rushing to YouTube, trying to get educated on what's going up in price, what games will be rare in the future, and trying to flush out your connection before you pay an arm and a leg to get some of these games. You turn on YouTube, you find a bunch of jackasses like me in the retro video game space, and we say things like, oh, look, I got this hidden gem that you should buy. It's a fantastic game. Oh, wait, this game is almost $400. And it seems like a lot of your favorite YouTubers already have the games in question when we talk about these rare games. And it just seems like they're just ahead of the curve. So, how do we do it? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over 5 of my favorite tips for predicting rare games before they get rare. So without further ado, let's talk about it. Okay, so before I get into this list, I do just want to give the warning that none of these are hard and fast rules. There's going to be exceptions to every one of these rules, but that being said, for the most part, these 5 tips have really served me well. So the first tip on this list is the most obvious, but it's also the least reliable. And the first tip is just keep your ear to the streets. If you listen closely and follow the gaming industry, you'll find things that pop up and events that'll happen that will cause the rise in video games. For instance, a game that comes to mind is on the PlayStation 4. It's Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. This game is often and commonly found for 20 to 30 bucks in game stores. At least that was the case, up until recently when the creator of the Berserk manga passed away. Literally the day he passed away, now Berserk and the Band of the Hawk goes for $120 online on the PlayStation 4. That being said, most of the time cases like this are examples of artificial inflation, and usually in most cases you can wait those out. Another example is DuckTales that came out on the 7th generation systems. There was an announcement last year that they were pulling that game from the online stores, and so the only way, of course, you can play DuckTales Remaster was to buy the physical copy. That overnight, again, I remember the PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3 version of that game was selling for $80 to $120 on eBay, and people were just trying to sell those off like crazy. Again, that's another case of artificial inflation. There were plenty of copies of that game to go around, so there's really no reason for them to sell at that price. People were trying to, hoard copies and try to get multiple copies so, they can increase their returns. But of course, the game got put back onto the digital store and the prices of the game plummeted overnight. DuckTales now can be commonly found for the PlayStation 3 for $15 to $20, $25 to $30 on the high end. So it's totally affordable, where again, a few months ago, it has shot up to, over $100. So those are the kind of things you have to listen to. Of course, the big one we had, in the last couple of months with Sony saying that they were closing down the PlayStation 3, the Vita, and the PSP store. And of course, the prices of PlayStation 3 games in particular shot up like crazy. And we also saw blowback on the PlayStation 2 and 1 as well, depending on the series, which we'll talk about more in the future. So again, the first tip is just to kind of keep your eyes and ears open for changing developments in the industry. Another one, Def Jam Vendetta. That game has been like $25 to $30 for several years. All of a sudden, DMX passing away has really risen the price of that game. Def Jam Vendetta is the only game in the Def Jam series that the great rapper appeared on, and so everybody trying to play as the dog, you got to go back and buy Def Jam Vendetta. So that was one of the reasons why that game shot up. Another one is a reason we'll talk about in a second. So again, first thing, try to keep your ear to the streets. So I just got done mentioning DMX and the Def Jam series, so I might as well give that as my second tip, and that is to look at series of games, and by that I mean like a series that came out on a particular system. If it has one game in the series that is of particular high cost, chances are that eventually the other games in the series are going to rise in price as well. Def Jam Vendetta is a great example of that. Def Jam Fight for New York right now across all systems, well over $100 on the PlayStation 2. To get the PlayStation 2 version, it's almost $200 right now. And when you get series like the Def Jam series, for instance, once one of the games financially gets out of the price range of most people, they will revert to another game in the series to get their fix. In this case, Def Jam Icon honestly was the weakest in the series, and it diverted from the original gameplay of the Def Jam series. But Def Jam Vendetta fights and plays a lot like Def Jam Fight for New York. So if you can't get your hands on Fight for New York because that game is almost $200, then you can definitely get Def Jam Vendetta for 40 to $50. It's totally worth it. And like I said, that coupled with the fact DMX passed away, now Def Jam Vendetta is hovering around the $70-$80 mark now, but you can still find Vendetta if you're crafty enough. You can still find it for around 50 or even a little less than that, and it's definitely worth that. But that's a great example of that. Another one that I can think of is the Xenosaga series. Xenosaga 3 is incredibly expensive, so much so that a lot of people, you're starting to see the rise in price in the other Xenosaga games. Xenosaga episodes 1 and 2 have been sub $20 for years, but slowly now you're seeing those games rise in price. Quickly, another one I can think of is Nightshade on the PlayStation 2. That's a game that recently shot up to the $60 and $70 mark. It's spiritual prequel, Shinobi, again, same type of gameplay, same kind of atmosphere and feel. That game is still like $20. So once we see Nightshade rise up to the $100 to the $120, $50 mark, you'll definitely start to see Shinobi follow suit. As people can no longer afford Nightshade, they will revert and play the other game in the series just to get that fix. So that's tip number 2. Definitely keep your eye on the series of games. If there's one game in the series that's particularly high, chances are you need to snatch the cheaper entries in the series before they follow suit. Okay, another tip is one that I kind of talk about semi-regularly on the channel, and that's to look for a specific publisher or developer. There are just some names in the industry that, games, their games tend to command a high price. In the past, we had games like Atlas or Treasure or even Working Designs. A lot of those games, again, like tended to rise in cost over the years, and the present is no different. We have games companies now like NIS America, Arc System Works, Idea Factory, Falcom, and there's more that I'm leaving out right now, but I'm saying that to say, again, like these companies, in the case of most of these companies, these companies will localize games for the North American region, so their bigger publishers don't have to. If you have a developer that's owned by Activision or even Sega, companies like that, Atlas or NIS America will say, hey, we'll localize this Japanese game in North America for you, and that takes a lot of the risk off the big publisher. And because they do that, though, the North American version usually comes over in smaller quantities. They're usually released to less fanfare and things like that. And so games like that always tend to go, rare. Again, anything Atlas, anything Treasure, all that stuff, whether it's the Persona series like Persona 4 Golden on the PS Vita is crazy prices right now. Like I said, there's a ton of them. Time and Eternity, I think that's an NIS America game for the PlayStation 3. That game recently has shot up in price. And again, tons that I can't think of off the top of my head. Some of the games that you can get cheaper right now would be like Persona 5 Strikers. That game is definitely going to be rare in the future. It's spin-off of the very popular Persona 5. You can get Persona 5 Royal. I got the Royal Steelbook Edition recently for like $35. 13 Sentinels is another one by Atlas and Vanillaware. That one I got over Christmas break for, $20 on sale. And so those are definitely games that we're going to see, skyrocket in price throughout the year. So again, look for those developers. If you see an interesting game or a game you might not have heard of by one of those companies, chances are it was brought over in limited quantities, and thus the US version, at least, or the North American version, will be very rare in the future. So again, keep an eye on that. Scoop those games up if you can. Okay, tip number 4 here is to look for a specific genre when it comes to picking out your video games. Throughout the history of video games, for the most part, there are certain genres of games that command higher price than others. For instance, RPGs across all platforms tend to hold their value and increase their value over time faster than, say, fighting games or first-person shooters or sports games, for that matter. Action 3D platformers, things like that. Some of your more obscure hack and slash titles, all those tend to command higher prices as, time goes on. So, I mean, example, looking at, like PlayStation RPGs like Legend of Dragoon, which has recently shot up in price, the Parasite Eve games that have shot up in price, fantastic RPGs on the system, Vagrant Story, Xenogears, all of those commanding high prices compared to fantastic fighting games on the system, for instance, like Street Fighter Alpha 3, Tekken 3, Soul Blade, for instance. All those games can be had for, $30 and under. So again, genre is another thing to look at. You see it across, again, all systems, whether that's, RPGs we're looking at on the PlayStation 2, like Valkyrie Profile Lilith, or what's the other one? Dark Cloud 2 is another one I'm thinking about. A lot of those RPGs are starting to shoot up in price, but you can still get games like Tekken Tag Tournament or, Killzone as a first-person shooter. You can still get those genres pretty cheap. So, again, look at genre when it comes to, picking out which games are going to be rare. Because usually genres like RPGs, 3D platformers, those tend to increase and hold their value more than the rest. Okay, and last but not least, you got to take a look at the system itself. There are libraries out there that are way more, valuable than others. And, a lot of factors like nostalgia, which was the most popular port back in its day, things like that. And that's really, going to factor into how games hold their value and increase over time as people get older, like me, and you get that disposable income. You can go buy games without having to trade in games to get them, so you can get everything you wanted to play. Again, PlayStation 2, we're looking at games like Def Jam Fight for New York. PlayStation 2 version is almost $200, where you can get the Xbox version for about half. And it's actually starting to climb in price. Again, that's another thing when we're looking at system. If it's expensive on one system, once it gets to a certain point, then everybody's going to revert to that cheaper system to get the same kind of gameplay experience. So we saw that with Def Jam Fight for New York. The Xbox version is rising in price, and there's a ton of other games. Lollipop Chainsaw on the PlayStation 3 is an $85 game. The Xbox 360 version of Lollipop Chainsaw, though, is $20. So same game, and honestly, the 360 port probably runs better, but more people played it on the PlayStation 3, and of course with the other factors surrounding the PlayStation 3 right now, PlayStation 3 console is going to have the more expensive games when it comes to third-party ports. That being said, once Lollipop Chainsaw for the PlayStation 3 gets above a certain price, everybody's gonna revert back to, Lollipop Chainsaw on the Xbox 360 just to get the experience and have it in their collection. And so you'll see Lollipop Chainsaw on the 360 follow suit probably within the next 6 months to a year or so. So again, that's a perfect example of a game you can get cheap right now before it skyrockets out of price. So again, that's the last tip. Definitely look at the system and what's going on with the system itself. There's a lot of Dreamcast ports of games that are much more expensive than their PlayStation 2 counterparts. And yeah, like that's just one thing to keep an eye out for. Again, PlayStation 2 ports tend to be more expensive than the Xbox ports. The GameCube ports tend to be more expensive than the Xbox ports. And same thing with the Xbox 360, same thing with the Xbox One. There's a lot of fantastic games on the PlayStation 4 that you can save money by buying the Xbox One version of. So definitely keep an eye out on the consoles themselves and see who has the more expensive library. All right, guys, well, I do believe that's all I got for you, but let's talk about it in the comments section below. Questions, comments, concerns, threats. What are some other ways that you guys predict games before they shoot up in price? If you guys like this content, go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already. You'll be glad you did. I do believe that's all I got for you. Lightsaber Samurai out, and peace.